My fiancée wanted a breakup. She said her besties think she's out of my league and deserves better than a welder. When her backup plan failed, she wanted to get back together. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now, let's start the video. Sup, Reddit? My fiancée dropped this bomb out of the blue. We'd planned our future for years, and I thought we were building something real, so I respected her choice and walked out of her life. Few months later, I had a dangerous surgery, and she actually visited demanding my help and wanting to get back together. Here's what went down. I'm 25 male, been with my ex-fiancée, Kayla, 24 female, for 6 years total, engaged for the last 8 months. I work as a certified welder at a local fabrication shop. Good money, steady work, and I actually build things that matter. Kayla works at a high-end salon downtown, one of those places that charges $200 for a haircut. Kayla's attractive. Really attractive. The kind of woman who gets double takes at the grocery store and free drinks at bars she doesn't even want. I'm a regular guy who knows his way around a MIG torch and can fix most things that break. Not ugly, but definitely not model material. We worked because we fit together in ways that mattered. We met senior year when she was dating Brad Mitchell, the quarterback who peaked in high school and thought his jersey number made him special. I was the shop class guy who actually knew how to fix her beat-up car when it died in the school parking lot. Brad was too busy worrying about his hair getting messed up to get his hands dirty. Took me about 20 minutes to diagnose a bad alternator and another hour that weekend to replace it for the cost of parts. That's how it started. She'd text me when something broke. I'd fix it. We'd talk while I worked. She'd laugh at my jokes. And just like that, we clicked. The engagement happened last July during a camping trip we'd been planning for months. Just us, a campfire, and the ring I'd been saving for since February. 2-carat diamond, white gold setting. Cost me 12 weeks of overtime, but worth every hour when I saw her face. We set the date for October the following year. Gave ourselves plenty of time to save money and plan properly. My best friend Leo was the first person I called after Kayla said yes. Dude is your best mechanic, and has zero filter when it comes to giving relationship advice about damn time, he said when I told him. I was starting to think you were going to propose to your welding torch instead. Everything felt solid for months. We found a venue, booked a photographer, started talking about honeymoon destinations. Kayla would show me pictures of dresses she liked. I'd pretend to have opinions about flowers and centerpieces. Everything was good. The first crack appeared this past January when Kayla started attending this new fitness class downtown. Some trendy Pilates place that cost more per month than most people spend on groceries. She'd been wanting to get more into fitness after the holidays, and I supported it completely. The problem wasn't the fitness class. The problem was the women she met there. Kayla would come home with stories about her new workout friends. Jessica, married to a corporate lawyer, drives a BMW, just got back from Cabo. Sarah dating a cardiologist, shopping for engagement rings in the $50,000 range. Amanda, recently divorced, getting $8,000 monthly in spousal support, and exploring her options. At first, these were just random stories. Kayla would mention how Jessica bought a $400 purse without thinking about it, or how Sarah's boyfriend surprised her with a weekend in Napa. I listened, made appropriate comments, didn't think much of it. Why would I? Wrong move. But the story started changing tone around late February. Instead of just mentioning what these women did, Kayla started adding commentary. How Jessica thought it was cute that Kayla was getting married so young. How Sarah couldn't understand why Kayla would settle down when she had so many options. How Amanda kept saying Kayla was wasting her prime years on one guy. The first time Kayla repeated one of these comments to me, I kept it simple. These women don't know us. What matters is what we want. She agreed. Said they were just being nosy. Promised she wouldn't let their opinions get to her. But the comments kept coming, and they kept getting more specific. March was when things got weird. She started making small criticisms about stuff that had never bothered her before. My work clothes were really dirty when I picked her up from the salon. Could I maybe change before we went out to dinner? My truck was kind of loud. Had I thought about getting something newer? Maybe I should consider expanding my career goals since we were getting married soon. None of these were fights. Kayla wasn't being aggressive or mean, but each comment felt like a tiny test, like she was checking to see how I'd react to suggestions for improvement. I kept my responses measured. I explained that work clothes get dirty because I do actual work. I pointed out that my truck was paid off and reliable. I mentioned that my career goals included becoming a certified underwater welder, which would double my income within 2 years. She would always back down when I pushed back, but I could see her processing my responses differently than she used to. Like she was comparing them to some external standard I wasn't aware of. The breaking point came in early April. We were supposed to meet her parents for dinner at their house. Casual Sunday family meal, nothing formal. I'd been working on a rush job all weekend, trying to finish structural repairs on a warehouse before the Monday deadline. The work ran long and I showed up at Kayla's apartment 20 minutes late, still in my work clothes, small amount of metal dust on my hands. Kayla took one look at me and her whole expression changed. Seriously, you're going to my parents' house like that? I looked down at myself. Clean jeans, work shirt with the company logo, steel-toed boots, a little dust, sure. But nothing offensive. I'm coming straight from work. Your parents have seen me in work clothes before. That was different. This is dinner. Can't you at least change? Kayla, I'm 20 minutes late already. Your parents aren't going to care what I'm wearing. She stood there for a full 30 seconds, just staring at me like I'd said something in a foreign language. Then she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Fine, but this is embarrassing. That word hit differently than the previous comments. Not disappointed or frustrated. Embarrassed. Like being seen with me, was something she had to apologize for. The dinner was awkward as hell. Kayla barely spoke. She checking her phone seemed distracted. Her parents tried to include me in conversation about the wedding, but Kayla kept giving short answers and changing the subject. When her dad asked about my underwater welding certification, she actually rolled her eyes. On the drive back to her place, I tried to address what had happened. You want to tell me what that was about? Nothing. I'm just tired. Kayla. You acted like you were ashamed to be there with me. I wasn't ashamed. I wish you'd made more effort. More effort to what? Be someone I'm not? She didn't answer that question. Just stared out the window until we got to her apartment. The next day, I called Leo to vent about the whole situation. What's next? She going to be mad that your hands are too rough from building things that don't collapse? April and May were like watching a slow-motion car crash. Kayla didn't suddenly become a different person. The changes were gradual, almost subtle, but consistent enough that I could feel something shifting beneath us. The fitness class group became her primary social circle almost overnight. She'd go to dinner with them twice a week. Weekend brunches, shopping trips to expensive stores I'd never heard of. When I asked to meet these women who were taking up so much of her time, she always had an excuse. They were busy. The timing wasn't right. Maybe next time. Meanwhile, she started declining invitations to hang out with our mutual friends. Game nights with my buddies became not really her thing anymore. Double dates with couples we'd known for years suddenly felt too young for where she was in life. She stopped coming to my company barbecues and family gatherings, claiming work was too busy or she had plans with her fitness friends. Leo was the first to call it out directly during a group hangout in late April. Where's Kayla tonight? Our friend Mike asked. Wine tasting with her fitness friends, I said. Leo looked up from his pool shot again. What is this? The fourth weekend in a row? Either those women are alcoholics or Kayla's training to become a sommelier. The criticism became more frequent and more pointed. My apartment was pretty basic. Had I thought about upgrading? My weekend clothes were very casual. Maybe I should invest in some nicer shirts. My idea of a good date night, dinner at a local restaurant followed by a movie was kind of routine compared to what other couples were doing. Each criticism came with a suggestion for improvement, always framed as helpful advice rather than complaints. Kayla wasn't being mean about it, which somehow made it worse. She was treating me like a project that needed work. I started paying attention to the specific language she used. Words like ambitious, sophisticated, and professional came up constantly in our conversations. Always in contrast to things about our life together. Other men were ambitious. I was comfortable where I was. Her new friends were sophisticated. Our old crowd was kind of immature. Her coworkers' boyfriends had professional careers. I had just a job. During one of our regular beer nights in May, I shared some of Kayla's recent comments with Leo. Wait, hold up, Leo said, nearly choking on his drink. She said, you have just a job. Dude, what does Jessica do again? Besides spend her husband's money on yoga pants, the sex life took a hit, too. Kayla became less interested, more distant, like her mind was somewhere else, even when we were together. She started working longer hours at the salon, picking up extra clients on weekends. When I suggested we spend more time together, she'd remind me how important it was for her to focus on her career and build her network. In May, things escalated. She started making direct comparisons between me and other men. Jessica's husband had just gotten a promotion at his law firm. Sarah's boyfriend was looking at houses in the expensive part of town. Amanda was dating a guy who owned his own business and drove a Tesla. I'm not saying you should be like them, Kayla would say after sharing these stories. I'm just saying it's interesting how some people really go after what they want. I tried addressing this directly several times. Asked her if she was unhappy with our relationship, if there was something specific she needed from me, if we should postpone the wedding until we worked through whatever was happening. Each time she'd deny there was a problem, say she loved me exactly as I was, then follow up with another suggestion for how I could improve myself. The underwater welding certification became a constant topic. When was I starting the program? How much more money would I make? Would I consider moving somewhere with more opportunities? She had done research on underwater welder salaries and was convinced this was my ticket to reaching my potential. The breaking point came in late May during a conversation about our wedding budget. We'd been planning a nice but reasonable celebration, about $20,000 total, split between our families and our savings. Not fancy, but definitely not cheap either. Kayla brought up how Jessica's wedding had cost $80,000 and looked like something out of a magazine, how Sarah was already planning a $60,000 engagement party, how Amanda's divorce settlement meant she could afford whatever she wanted for her next wedding. I'm not saying we need to spend that much, Kayla said, but don't you think we should consider what we're capable of if we really tried? What do you mean? I mean, if you got serious about expanding your career options, if I took on more high-end clients, maybe we could have the kind of wedding that actually represents who we want to be. Who do we want to be, Kayla? She couldn't answer that question directly. Instead, she showed me photos from Jessica's wedding on her phone, the venue, the flowers, the dress, the photographer, everything looked expensive. Don't you think this is beautiful? It's nice, but it's not us. How do you know what's us? Maybe we've been thinking too small. Kayla wasn't just getting advice from her fitness class friends, she was getting a complete worldview overhaul. These women had convinced her that settling down young meant missing out on opportunities. That marrying someone in a blue-collar job meant accepting a limited future. June was when I stopped trying to save something that was already dead. The final month of our relationship felt like living with a stranger who happened to look like my fiancé. Kayla would come home from her fitness class or dinners with her new friends, and immediately start scrolling through social media, showing me pictures of places she wanted to visit, restaurants she wanted to try, experiences she wanted to have, all of them expensive, all of them requiring a lifestyle we didn't have. Look at this place in Napa that Sarah went to. Isn't it amazing? Looks nice. We should plan a trip like this, Kayla. That's a $500 a night resort. So other people our age manage to afford nice things. These conversations became daily occurrences. Work became my refuge. I'd started the underwater welding certification program in early May, attending classes 3 nights, a week after my regular shifts. The program was intense. Technical diving, underwater cutting techniques, safety protocols that could save your life 60 feet below the surface. I loved every minute of it. Kayla had initially been supportive of the certification, mainly because she'd researched the salary potential. But as the program demanded more of my time and energy, she became resentful. I was always studying or too tired to go out or not prioritizing our relationship. She was spending 4 nights a week with her fitness friends and working extra hours to afford her new lifestyle. But my 3 nights of classes were somehow a problem. Leo pointed out the obvious during one of our study sessions at his shop. Let me understand this. She's mad that you're studying to make more money, which is what she wants. But she's not mad about spending her own money on classes about how to breathe better while stretching. That makes perfect sense. In late June, things came to a head during what should have been a simple conversation about our shared calendar. She wanted to attend a wine tasting event with her friends the same weekend we'd planned to visit my parents. When I pointed out the conflict, she suggested we reschedule the family visit. It's not like we don't see your parents all the time, Kayla. We haven't seen them since Easter and we made these plans 2 months ago. I know, but this wine thing is important. For what? For my career. These women know people in the beauty industry. Jessica's husband has connections at some major cosmetics companies. I stared at her. You're a hairstylist, not a cosmetics executive. Maybe I could be. Maybe I'm thinking bigger than just cutting hair for the rest of my life. She wasn't just dissatisfied with our relationship. She was dissatisfied with herself, with her choices, with the life she'd built before meeting her new friends. The wine tasting became a symbol of everything wrong between us. Kayla went despite my pointing out how it conflicted with our family plans. She came home 3 hours late, slightly tipsy and full of stories about the amazing people she'd met. You should have come with me. You would have learned so much about what successful people actually do with their weekends. I was visiting my parents like we planned, right? But sometimes you have to choose between being comfortable and being ambitious. Leo's reaction when I told him about this exchange was priceless. So drinking overpriced wine with strangers is ambitious, but visiting the people who raised you is being comfortable. I'd love to see these women try to change a tire or balance a checkbook. Real ambitious stuff. July was decision time. Decision. She had started making comments about postponing the wedding. Not canceling it, just pushing it back a year or 2 while we figured out our direction. She wanted time to make sure we were building the right foundation for our future. I told her we needed to make a decision, move forward with the wedding as planned or call it off entirely. Why does it have to be all or nothing? Why can't we just take some time to grow as individuals? Because we're either building something together or we're not. Kayla, there's no middle ground. That's very black and white thinking. Yeah, it is. Because commitment is black and white. Kayla couldn't handle that level of directness. She'd gotten used to having conversations where everything was negotiable. where every decision could be delayed or revised based on new information. We didn't fight about it. We didn't have screaming matches or throw things at each other. We just slowly stopped functioning as a couple. Kayla would make plans without consulting me. I'd focus on work and my certification program. We'd go days without having a real conversation, weeks without talking about anything more significant than whose turn it was to pick up groceries. By early August, we were basically roommates who happened to be engaged. We'd see each other for an hour in the evening, make small talk about our days, then go to bed at different times. The end came on a Tuesday night in mid-August. She had been at another dinner with her friends and came home around 10 p.m. I was studying for my final certification exam, spread out at the kitchen table with textbooks and practice tests. She sat down across from me and just watched me work for about 10 minutes before speaking. Do you ever think about what our life is going to look like in 5 years? I looked up from my books. I think about it all the time. What do you see? A house with a workshop in the garage? Maybe some kids. Good work that pays well and keeps me interested. Time with family and friends who matter. Building something that lasts. She nodded slowly. That sounds nice. But I don't think that's enough for me anymore. What would be enough? I don't know yet. That's the problem. Kayla. You can't plan a marriage around hypothetical better options. I'm not talking about other people. I'm talking about potential. I didn't know I had potential to do what? I think we should talk about taking a break, she said finally. There's no such thing as taking a break from an engagement, Kayla. We're either getting married or we're not. Why does everything have to be so absolute with you? Because that's how commitment works. That conversation lasted another hour, covering the same ground we'd been circling for weeks. Kayla wanted flexibility, options, time to explore her potential. I wanted a partner who was sure about choosing me, sure about building our life together, sure about our future. We couldn't give each other what we wanted, so we had to end. The actual breakup happened 3 days later on a Friday evening in August. We'd both had time to think about our Tuesday conversation, and neither of us had changed positions. Kayla still wanted space to figure things out. I still believed that being engaged meant we'd already figured out the important stuff. Kayla had spent those 3 days talking to her fitness friends about our relationship problems. When she came home Friday night, she had the confident air of someone who'd received a lot of supportive advice about making a difficult but necessary decision. I've been thinking about what we talked about, she said like she was about to deliver a presentation. And I think we want different things right now. What do I want that you don't want? You want everything to stay exactly the same. You want to get married and have the same life we've always had, just with rings and a certificate. I want to grow. I want to challenge myself. That was the most honest thing she'd said in months. All right then. I said, let's call it off. I think Kayla expected more of a fight, more attempts to convince her to stay, more negotiations about terms and timelines. When I accepted her decision immediately, she seemed almost disappointed. Just like that. Kayla, you just told me you don't think you can grow as a person while married to me. What exactly am I supposed to argue with? I didn't say it like that. Yes, you did. You said you can't achieve what you're capable of achieving if we get married. Which means you think I'm holding you back. I think the relationship is holding us both back. From what? Again, she couldn't give me a specific answer. Just vague references to potential and growth and possibilities she hadn't explored yet. The ring came off without drama. Kayla pulled it off her finger and set it on the coffee table between us like she was returning a library book. I picked it up and put it in my pocket. What about the wedding deposits? She asked. I'll handle the cancellations. You can deal with your dress. What about our friends? They're adults. They'll figure it out. We spent the next hour working through logistics. Kayla would stay in her apartment. I'd move my stuff out over the weekend. We'd split up our shared possessions. Not much since we'd never officially lived together. We'd tell our families separately rather than making joint announcements. The whole conversation was remarkably civilized. I packed my belongings that weekend while Kayla was out with her friends. Didn't take long since I'd always maintained my own apartment. Clothes, some books, a few kitchen items I'd brought over, my tools that I kept in her garage. Everything fit in my truck in 2 trips. Left her keys on the kitchen counter along with a note thanking her for 6 years together and wishing her well. Didn't see the point in a dramatic goodbye scene when we'd already said everything that needed saying. The hardest part was calling her parents. These people had been planning to become my in-laws for 8 months. I gave them the basics. They were disappointed. Her little sister, Emma, took it harder. She'd been excited about being a bridesmaid, had already picked out her dress. I told her sometimes adults realize they're not as compatible as they thought, and that it was better to figure that out before getting married rather than after. My own parents were relieved, which surprised me until they explained they'd been worried about Kayla's attitude changes over the past few months. Apparently, I hadn't been hiding my frustration as well as I thought. Most of our mutual friends weren't shocked either. A few mentioned they'd noticed Kayla seemed different lately, more critical, and less interested in group activities. The only real surprise was how quickly Kayla moved on. Within 2 weeks, she was posting pictures from expensive restaurants and weekend trips with her fitness friends. Her social media presence completely changed. Less couple photos and family events, more solo shots and group pictures with her new crowd. I stayed off social media entirely for the first month. Didn't need to see updates about Kayla's new life or explanations about why our relationship had ended. Leo was the first person to check on me after the breakup. He showed up at my apartment with a case of drinks, and his trademark subtle approach to emotional support. "So, Kayla's finally free to explore her full potential," he said, cracking open a bottle. "I give it 3 months before she's texting you about how yoga class didn't prepare her for the real world." September through November was about rebuilding my life as a single person and focusing on the goals I'd set before Kayla decided our relationship was holding her back. I finished my underwater welding certification in early October, passing all the technical and practical exams on the first try. The program had been challenging, but I genuinely enjoyed the technical aspects and the problem-solving required for underwater repairs. Within a week of getting certified, I had 3 job offers. It's specialized work, and there aren't many people qualified to do it safely. I chose a company that handles infrastructure repairs for bridges, dams, and offshore platforms across the Southeast. The money was exactly what I'd hoped for. My first contract was a bridge inspection and repair project that paid $2,800 for a weekend's work. Not bad for someone who supposedly wasn't ambitious enough. I moved to a better apartment in November. 2 bedrooms, garage space for my truck and equipment, workshop area for side projects. Nothing fancy, but comfortable and functional. Started saving for a down payment on a house, figuring I'd be ready to buy something within 2 years. Work kept me busy and satisfied. The regular fabrication job provided steady income and interesting projects. The underwater contracts were both challenging and lucrative. I was learning constantly, solving problems I'd never encountered before, building skills that few people possessed. I also started hitting the gym consistently for the first time since high school. Not because I was trying to prove anything, but because the underwater work required serious physical conditioning. Dating wasn't a priority, but I wasn't actively avoiding it either. Went out with a few women I met through friends or work connections. Nothing serious, just casual dinners and movies. It felt good to spend time with people who were interested in me rather than trying to convince me to become someone else. Through mutual friends, I heard occasional updates about Kayla. She was still working at the salon but taking additional classes in some kind of advanced beauty technique. Still hanging out with her fitness friends, though apparently the group dynamics were getting complicated. Something about money and competing for attention from the same social circles. In November, I ran into Jessica at a coffee shop downtown. One of Kayla's fitness friends, the lawyer's wife who drove the BMW and went to Cabo. She recognized me and came over to say hello. "How are you doing? Kayla mentioned you guys had decided to take different paths." "I'm doing well. Work's going great, staying busy." "That's good to hear. Kayla said you were getting into some kind of specialized welding, underwater welding." "Just finished certification." Jessica looked genuinely interested. "That sounds fascinating and probably very well paying." "It's good work, I bet. My husband has clients in the maritime industry. They're always complaining about how hard it is to find qualified underwater welders." We talked for a few more minutes about work and mutual acquaintances. Jessica was polite and seemed genuinely friendly, which made me wonder how much influence she'd actually had on Kayla's decision-making. Maybe Kayla had been hearing what she wanted to hear rather than getting the direct advice she claimed. At the end of our conversation, Jessica said something interesting. "For what it's worth, I always thought you and Kayla were good together. Sometimes people get restless and think the grass is greener somewhere else." December brought my first major underwater contract. A dam repair project that would take 3 weeks and pay more than I used to make in 6 months at the regular fabrication job. I loved every minute of it. The project team was small, just 5 guys, all specialists in different aspects of underwater construction. We worked efficiently, trusted each other's expertise, and took pride in solving problems that most people couldn't even understand. Between regular work and underwater contracts, I was making more money than I'd ever imagined. I started thinking about buying a house earlier than planned. With my income trajectory and the money I'd saved, I could afford something substantial. Leo helped me look at houses during weekends in December. His commentary on my improved financial situation was typically understated. "So, you're making 6 figures doing something most people can't even pronounce. And Kayla thinks you needed more ambition." I'm starting to think those fitness classes affected more than just her flexibility. January brought the headaches. At first, just occasional sharp pain behind my left eye, usually when I was working in awkward positions or dealing with complex underwater repairs. I figured it was occupational neck strain from wearing heavy diving equipment. Eye strain from working in low visibility conditions, maybe some sinus issues from pressure changes. The headaches got more frequent through February and more intense. Not constant pain, but sudden sharp episodes that would leave me dizzy and disoriented for several minutes. I started keeping ibuprofen in my truck and taking breaks more often during long work sessions. The vision problem started in early March. At first, it only lasted a few seconds, but the episodes became longer and more frequent. When I started having trouble focusing during precision welding work, I knew something was seriously wrong. You can't afford concentration lapses when you're working with cutting torches in confined spaces. Made an appointment with my regular doctor in late March. He asked about my symptoms, did some basic tests, and immediately referred me to a neurologist. That was my first indication this wasn't just job-related stress or eye strain. The neurologist ordered a series of tests, MRI scans, blood work, cognitive assessments, professional, but clearly concerned about what the initial scans were showing. Started asking questions about family medical history, and whether I'd experienced any head injuries. While waiting for test results, I tried to maintain normal routines, kept working regular fabrication jobs, but turned down underwater contracts until I knew what was going on. Leo was the one who drove me to get the test results. The seizure happened on a Saturday morning in early April. I was at Home Depot, picking up materials for a side project when everything went sideways. 1 second, I was comparing prices on copper fittings. The next second I was on the ground with paramedics asking me basic questions I couldn't answer. I don't remember the seizure itself, just the confusion afterward. The paramedics said witnesses described about 90 seconds of convulsions before I gradually regained consciousness. Emergency room. More tests, more doctors with increasingly serious expressions. Finally, a neurosurgeon sat me down with scan results that showed exactly why I'd been having problems. Brain tumor, glioma about the size of a walnut located in an area that controlled vision and motor coordination, explained the headaches, the vision problems, and the seizure. Surgery was possible, but it would be complex and carry significant risks. Sometimes life throws unexpected challenges and you either handle them professionally or you don't. I chose to handle it professionally. The surgeon was optimistic about complete removal, but honest about potential complications. Brain surgery isn't like fixing a welding error. You can't just grind out the bad section and start over. We scheduled the operation for the following Tuesday and started preparing for a long recovery period. My boss at the fabrication shop was incredibly supportive, held my position, coordinated with insurance, made sure I understood the job would be there when I was ready. The underwater welding company was equally accommodating. They knew skilled people were rare and weren't going anywhere. Word got around quickly in our small town. Most of my friends started organizing visits and support. My parents drove down from 2 states away. What I didn't expect was hearing from Kayla. Leo was with me when the nurse mentioned that someone named Kayla had called asking about visiting hours. Oh, hell no, Leo said immediately. She disappears for 8 months and now wants to show up because you're in the hospital. What's next? She going to bring flowers and an apology letter? Kayla showed up at the hospital on Saturday, 3 days before my scheduled surgery. I was reviewing pre-operative instructions when she walked into my room, looking like she'd been crying, but with something desperate in her eyes that had nothing to do with concern for my health. I heard what happened. How are you feeling? I'm fine. Surgery's Tuesday, then recovery. She sat down without being invited and started with what seemed like genuine small talk. Asked about the doctors, the procedure, my parents' visit. After about 10 minutes of carefully neutral conversation, she shifted to what felt like the real reason for her visit. Listen, I know the timing isn't great, but I really need to talk to someone I trust about some problems I'm having. There it was. Not. I'm sorry about your diagnosis, just I need something from you. You should leave. I told her directly. Please just hear me out. I made some serious mistakes and I don't know what to do. Kayla, I'm having brain surgery in 3 days. I don't want to hear about your problems. Her concerned act dropped immediately, replaced by the entitled attitude I remembered from our breakup. Fine, but I'm in real trouble here. That guy I was dating turned out to be married, and his wife is trying to destroy my life. And my friends convinced me to invest in some real estate deals that turned out to be completely fake. And now I owe almost $300,000. I just stared at her. And you thought I'd care about this because we were together for 6 years. Because you know me better than anyone because I lost my job and I can't make rent and everyone I thought I could trust disappeared. Sounds like you got exactly what you were looking for. What's that supposed to mean? You wanted to explore your potential, date more ambitious people, see what you were capable of achieving. How's that working out? Kayla's voice started rising, getting more desperate and aggressive. I know I made mistakes, okay? I know I said things I shouldn't have said. But I thought you'd be mature enough to help someone who needs it. Help with what? Cleaning up the mess you made by deciding I wasn't good enough for you. I pressed the call button for the nurse. Kayla saw what I was doing and completely lost control. You can't be serious right now. I'm telling you I need help, and you're calling security. Ma'am, you need to lower your voice, the nurse said as she entered the room. This is ridiculous. We were engaged. We were going to get married. You can't just throw away 6 years because I made one mistake. Ma'am? I'm going to have to ask you to leave the room, the nurse said firmly. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway as Kayla became increasingly hysterical. I still love you. I still care about you. Everything I said was stupid and I was wrong and I'm sorry. Ma'am, we need you to come with us. One of the guards said, You're making a huge mistake. I'm the best thing that ever happened to you. You'll regret this. As security escorted her out, she kept yelling down the hallway about how I was being unreasonable and how she was just trying to make things right. The nurse shook her head and asked if I was okay. Never been better. I told her honestly. Leo showed up about an hour after the Kayla incident, carrying coffee and wearing the expression of someone who'd heard the whole story from the nurses. I filled him in on Kayla's surprise visit and her request for help with her problems. So, Leo said when I finished, she dates a married guy, gets scammed by her friends, loses her job, and then decides to come beg for help from the man she dumped for not being ambitious enough. That's like setting your house on fire and then asking the fire department for a loan. The surgery went perfectly, 8.5 hours, but the surgeon achieved complete tumor removal, with clean margins and no complications. Recovery was textbook. 10 days in the hospital, then 6 weeks at my parents' house while I regained full strength and coordination. Leo visited me almost daily during recovery, bringing updates from work and increasingly ridiculous stories about what he'd been telling people about my condition. I told your neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, that they had to replace part of your brain with a welding torch, he said during one visit. She believed it for about 30 seconds until I mentioned the flame would interfere with your sleep. During recovery, I heard updates about Kayla's situation through Emma, who would visit occasionally to check on my progress. The full scope of Kayla's poor decision-making was actually worse than what she'd admitted in the hospital. The married man she'd been dating wasn't just cheating on his wife. He'd been using Kayla and several other women to help launder money through fraudulent real estate investments. His wife wasn't just angry about the affair. She was cooperating with federal investigators, building a case against her husband's business activities. Kayla wasn't just a victim of the real estate scam. She was potentially facing criminal charges as an unwitting accomplice. The $300,000 debt was real, but she also owed back taxes on unreported income from the fake investments. The IRS had frozen her bank accounts while they investigated her involvement. The salon had fired her, not just because of the affair drama, but because they'd discovered she'd been overcharging clients for services and pocketing the difference. Her fancy friends hadn't just disappeared when her money problem started. They'd actively distanced themselves to avoid being associated with the criminal investigation. But here's the most satisfying part. Kayla's parents refused to bail her out. After learning about how she treated me and hearing about her entitled hospital meltdown from Emma, they decided their daughter needed to face the consequences. She ended up having to declare bankruptcy, lost her apartment, and moved back in with a distant aunt in another state. The criminal investigation followed her there, and she was eventually charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, though she ultimately pled down to a misdemeanor with restitution requirements. By August, I was back to full-time work, including underwater contracts. The doctors had cleared me completely. No cognitive impairment, no motor coordination issues, no restrictions on my activities. I found the engagement ring in my safe while organizing my equipment, decided to sell it, and put the money toward a down payment on a house. No point keeping reminders of people who don't exist anymore.